All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into what is, hands down, the most dramatic three-act biographical arc in the history of mixed martial arts. We're doing a structured deep dive into the completely unprecedented saga of MMA's biggest superstar, Conor McGregor. Look, this isn't just a story about cage fighting. It's an absolutely incredible case study of raw ambition, astronomical success, chaotic self-destruction, and now, a wildly uncertain return. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover, so let's jump right in. Okay, let's dive into this because you really can't understand the absolute peak of this guy's career without looking at the basement first. I mean, his early days literally meant surviving on €188 government welfare checks and working as an apprentice plumber on freezing industrial sites in Ireland. Fast forward just a handful of years, he sold his whiskey brand for a reported $600 million, beating out literal global icons like Messi and Ronaldo to become Forbes' highest paid athlete in the world. Section 1, The Rags to Riches. Let's look at McGregor's early days. Coming from a working-class family in Crumlin, which is an area known for having some rougher edges, McGregor viewed fighting as his ultimate escape ticket. During those early, poverty-stricken days, he relied completely on the unwavering support of his partner, Dee Devlin. She actually quit her job just to make sure he could train full-time while they were totally flat broke. The hunger in this era was incredibly real. And let's look at how this builds, because his ascent in the UFC was just unprecedented. In April 2013, he makes his debut and completely flatlines his opponent in just 1.7 minutes. By 2015, he steps into the cage against Jose Aldo. Now, Aldo was the undisputed featherweight champion, riding a massive 10-year unbeaten streak. McGregor knocked him out cold in exactly 13 seconds. Then, just a year later at Madison Square Garden, he systematically dismantles Eddie Alvarez to become the very first fighter in UFC history to hold two championship belts at the exact same time. And you know, this quote right here brilliantly illustrates the philosophy behind that whole meteoric rise. Precision beats power and timing beats speed. That was his explanation right after putting Jose Aldo to sleep. It proved to the world that his massive hype and all that arrogant trash talk, it wasn't just empty noise. He operated on a completely different level of self-belief, and it was entirely backed up by this almost scientific understanding of his own striking mechanics. All right, Section 2, Mainstreaming the MMA World. So that elite self-belief allowed him to do something no other fighter had ever done. He basically dragged the niche sport of MMA, kicking and screaming, right into the global pop culture mainstream. McGregor didn't just participate in the sport, he completely redefined its commercial ceiling. I mean, look at these numbers. They are staggering. McGregor headlined the top 5 highest-selling pay-per-views in UFC history, and his crossover boxing match against the undefeated Floyd Mayweather alone drew 3.4 million buys. The sheer absurdity of an MMA champion stepping into a boxing ring against the greatest boxer of a generation didn't even matter to people. It was an absolute financial triumph. He made a reported $100 million and then brilliantly used the post-fight press conference with literally the highest eyeballs possible to launch his own whiskey brand. But the marketing genius wasn't just in his business moves. It was his persona. When he delivered this iconic line on the mic after winning his second belt, it cemented his character forever. The unapologetic, arrogant Irish gangster who said whatever he wanted and always backed it up. And the crazy part, it wasn't an act. He truly believed it, and that authenticity became his single biggest weapon for drawing in millions of viewers who had never even watched a cage fight before. Which brings us to Section 3, the devastating downfall begins. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the exact same traits that built his empire actually began to trigger its collapse. We can kind of call this the hubris to humbling pipeline. McGregor's trademark trash talk, attacking opponents' families, religions, their countries, had always broken guys mentally before they even stepped into the cage. But against the undefeated Russian Khabib Nurmagomedov, this psychological warfare catastrophically backfired. Instead of breaking Khabib's spirit, those deeply personal insults simply fueled a deeply terrifying rage. It all unravels chronologically here. First, the chaos boils over in Brooklyn when McGregor and his entourage attack a fighter bus, throwing a massive metal dolly through the window and injuring multiple athletes. Then, they finally meet in the cage, and it is just a completely one-sided beatdown, ending in a brutal fourth-round submission loss for McGregor. And finally, the second he taps, this infamous chaotic brawl breaks out both inside and outside the octagon. Now, sure, it was the highest-selling MMA event ever, but it really marked the start of a very steep professional decline. And that decline rapidly accelerated during his trilogy with Dustin Poirier. Poirier handed McGregor his first ever career knockout loss.
Things also got super ugly outside the cage, with this bitter dispute over a promised charity donation that McGregor failed to deliver to Poirier's foundation. But the true climax was the trilogy fight in 2021. McGregor literally stepped backward and his left shin bone just completely snapped. As one doctor actually noted, his leg was essentially dead from accumulated damage before it finally gave way. That horrific injury is what forced McGregor into a massive 5-year layoff.
Section 4 out of cage controversies. The most significant of these was the Nikita Hand trial. Now, it is important to note here that this was a purely civil trial, not a criminal case. Hand accused McGregor of assault in a Dublin hotel. McGregor testified that the encounter was fully consensual. After deliberation, a civil jury found McGregor liable and awarded Hand approximately €250,000 in damages. McGregor appealed this verdict to the courts and the Supreme Court, but those appeals were firmly rejected. The fallout from his behavior obviously extended into other areas as well. He famously punched an older man in a pub who refused a shot of his whiskey. McGregor pled guilty, paid a fine, and then actually bought that very same pub later on just to ban the man from ever entering again. During his injury recovery, he put on some highly noticeable muscle mass, which led to widespread suspicions of performance-enhancing drug use, especially after he abruptly exited the USOD testing pool. Ultimately, this all resulted in a wave of massive brand boycotts across Ireland and the UK, literally stripping his products from major supermarket shelves. The empire he built was severely tarnished. And finally, Section 5, the ultimate comeback fight. So why does all this matter right now? Well, you have to understand the reality of what he is walking into when the world tunes in to UFC 329 on July 11th. Look at this comparison. McGregor is 37 years old. He's been inactive for half a decade, and he only has one meaningful victory since 2016. His opponent? Max Holloway. He's 3 years younger, highly active, beloved by fans, and coming off a legendary viral knockout to secure the BMF championship. Statistically and logically speaking, every single advantage belongs to Max Holloway. Yet, despite the massive 5-year layoff, despite his historical cardio issues, and despite the sheer momentum of his opponent, the betting public is still rallying behind Conor. Why? Because of his lingering one-punch knockout power. The market knows Holloway should win, but fans still view McGregor as a massive threat because he still carries that heavy left hand. It's the ultimate equalizer that can change the entire direction of a fight in a split second. And that leaves us with this final, honestly pretty provocative question as we wrap up today's explainer. When Conor McGregor steps back into that octagon against Max Holloway, carrying the weight of a shattered leg, a deeply tarnished brand, and half a decade of cage rust, are we about to witness the greatest redemption story in the history of combat sports? Or are we simply tuning in to watch the inevitable, tragic final chapter of MMA's biggest star? The answer finally arrives on July 11th. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.